Black Ops 2 was a really interesting game. It's looked back on as one of the most fondly remembered Call of Duty games, not only as one of the highest regarded entries in the Black Ops franchise, but for having a standout multiplayer mode, a fantastic campaign that was one of Call of Duty's first true forays into a future warfare plotline, and, unfortunately, its Achilles heel, a complicated and, at many times, a very controversial zombies mode. Now, especially in the wake of Black Ops 2 being ported to modern PlayStation consoles this past week, I think it's time we face a harsher reality about this game. And hear me out, I know what you're thinking. Black Ops 2 is looked back on as one of the community's favorite entries in COD Zombies, but for someone like me who was physically at my local GameStop for the midnight release, went home, popped the game in, and loaded up Transit for the first time, I know what it felt like to be a part of Black Ops 2's original life cycle. Now picture this. Everyone just saw the Earth get blown up from a moon base in Black Ops 1, and we got one of the most story-heavy, heavily detailed Easter eggs in Zombies history. What do we follow that up with? Completely throwing those characters out, going to said blown up Earth, and following 4 brand new characters we've never met before on a map so ambitious that it was arguably too complicated and sprawling for its own good, failing to do nearly any of its intended mechanics good enough, feeling like a half-baked and rushed attempt at something new and quirky simply for the sake of being different. And yes, I understand that's what innovation is. You have to try and take those kinds of risks. And Jimmy Zielinski, who was the director of Zombies at the time, reportedly knew he was on his way out with Black Ops 2, so he wanted to transform this mode and truly turn it into something standout, something that could stand on its own compared to the rest of the mainline COD game that it was attached to. But in doing so, he tried to make this weird sort of open world, sort of linear, story-driven, monsters and zombies, post-apocalyptic, ragtag group, strange zombie survival mode, mashed together with the classic Zombies wave-based experience that we already became accustomed to in World at War and Black Ops 1. Don't get me wrong, I'm all for it. Jason Blundell, the creative director of Zombies for the latter half of Black Ops 2 and into Black Ops 3 that took over after Jimmy Zielinski left, did the exact same thing. The difference was Jason Blundell was given the budget and the hardware to do it. Jimmy attempted to do this with Black Ops 2, a game that was built at the end of a console generation with PS3 and Xbox 360, with plans far too ambitious for the platform that he was trying to build it on. And doing so all while Zombies was still essentially in an infancy phase, proving it deserved to sit at the big boys table with the other modes. It was in that weird stage when you get a haircut and you're trying to grow it out, but you're stuck looking like Coconut Head from Ned's Declassified School Survival Guide. It wasn't exactly the perfect time to take risks, especially ones it couldn't successfully deliver on. Now that being said, Black Ops 2 is looked back on very fondly. It featured maps like Mob of the Dead and Origins, but it also launched with Transit, notoriously one of the most disliked Zombies maps in Treyarch's long history of the mode. A map attempting to do more than it could achieve, throwing many Zombies mode norms like simple paths to turn the power on, easily accessible pack-a-punch machines, and straightforward access to perks completely out the window, opting rather to push the player to have to literally catch a bus to each area of the map, temporarily use mini generators to power perk machines, and make the pack-a-punch machine locked behind a death trap hallway only accessible by doing a side quest worth of objectives halfway across the map just to get the door open, once again temporarily. It also featured a terrible wonder weapon, the jet gun, an extremely annoying special enemy, both the denizens in the fog plus the Avogadro, an inescapable electric entity only damageable by beating him to death with an expensive melee weapon you had to find somewhere inaccessible on the map, and lava. Lava everywhere. So much lava you couldn't walk for more than 5 feet without taking fire damage, making you one-hittable by windmill attacks from zombies at almost any given moment until you eventually get to Juggernog 3 bus stops into the map. But hey, at least it had a cornfield that, if navigated properly, brought you to a cheeky appearance from none other than Noctur and Toten. It's not somewhere you can hang out all game because it's in the middle of a denizen-filled death fog, but it's neat that it's in the game, I guess. Go nostalgia. And it's super easy to look back on this game with rose-colored glasses because all these years later we can pin it against games like Vanguard, Advanced Warfare, and Ghosts, but in the moment it wasn't quite the peak Zombies game that folks remember it as today. It was a weird, buggy mess that strangely enough flips the script of what a lot of games like Black Ops 4 and Infinite Warfare typically get blamed for. Those games are known for being interesting Zombies games attached to controversial and unpopular multiplayer and campaigns, or lack thereof in Black Ops 4's case. Black Ops 2 was a controversial Zombies mode attached to a historically popular multiplayer and campaign, saddled uniquely with bugs, weird quirks, a less than popular story, and a cast of characters that have only ever appeared on 4 Zombies maps, but are cemented into the main Zombies Zombies storyline that we're still following today. And it's hard to look at Black Ops 2 without acknowledging two of its lesser popular DLC maps, Die Rise and Buried. And while my opinion is that they're fantastic maps and they're super unique concepts that are severely underrated, they also weren't very well received on launch. Think about this. Die Rise is the first and only Zombies map entirely designed around verticality, introducing an almost entirely useless new perk, frustrating new zombies, and only redeemed by a somewhat cool Easter egg and an extremely overpowered wonder weapon still classified today as one of the most overpowered in Zombies history. And then we flip things over to Buried, a Zombies map introducing an NPC who you need to use to break down barriers, witches that can steal your points, a pack-a-punch only accessible by clearing through a challenge zone and a maze, and a wonder weapon eerily similar to the jet gun only featured a few maps prior. These maps didn't have the best PR around them, and were being set up from failure from day one. While each of these maps nowadays are looked at more fondly now being in the context of a game that includes mob and origins, they were for a very long time looked at as either massive disappointments or just plain boring and uninspired in an otherwise weak showing of DLC and launch maps. For instance, I took a look back at two different threads in r/COD Zombies, the primary community for Zombies fans over on Reddit. One post from 10 years ago, so around the time Black Ops 3 was in its live life cycle, has folks saying the same exact thing about Buried ad nauseum. It's boring, too easy. Leroy was the worst mechanic on that map. Even a few folks going as far as to say it was the worst map of all time, which I think may be a stretch nowadays, even back then in the context of transit. However, flipping over to a thread from just 2 years ago, the script is completely flipped. The top comment calling it a 9 out of 10 and the most fun and innovative map in all of Black Ops 2, calling it Jimmy Zielinski's best map and a fantastic casual map with tons of replayability. And don't get me wrong, I mostly agree that it's a fun map and going back to it nowadays is in fact a pretty good time. But look at that drastic change in tone from the community. From the worst map of all time to 9 out of 10 and calling it a masterpiece, that's a massive tone shift in just a few short years, blinded by the nostalgia factor that people tie to these older games. And I'd imagine with porting Black Ops 2 to PS4 and PS5 this past week, we're going to see a lot more of that positive opinion and that nostalgia factor being placed on both games. But you have to remember that when looking back on these games, their lived history has to be accounted for when trying to paint what kind of games they are today and were back then. Black Ops 2, in my opinion, is a very fun game to go back and play today. It has very interesting maps, some of the best in Zombies history, and introduced us to the version of our main characters and storyline that we're still following today, 5 entries into the Black Ops series later. But it was also a very rocky roller coaster of a live game life cycle, alternating great maps with extremely poorly received ones, really only containing 2 great maps, one mostly fun but really an oddball out map, and 2 so poorly received they typically sit at the bottom of nearly every tier list ever made. It's not a perfect game, and that's fine, but looking back 14 years later, most folks look back at it as though, as a whole, it's some of the best work Treyarch's ever done, when it's more like a couple of good swings and a ton more misses. So I want to look at this game more realistically, and I want to be honest about Black Ops 2. Ultimately, it was a buggy, controversial mess, and yes, it brought us 2 of the greatest maps in Zombies history, and yes, it brought us new perks and new enemies and new storylines and the characters we know and love today. But it was also deeply flawed. It was buggy, it was unpolished, and it lacked the ability to truly carry out the ambitious artistic and creative vision it had behind it. Games are allowed to be a mixed bag, and I think looking back at Black Ops 2, most people forget the downsides, the drawbacks, and the issues that it had during its original run, simply because of maps and storylines that most people nowadays agree are better played via Black Ops 3's Zombie Chronicles, primarily meaning Origins plus PC custom fan-made remakes of Mob of the Dead. And that's not a bad thing. 2 superstar maps that help lift off the game cannot be ignored, but equally so, a massive disappointment of a map like Transit, coupled with buggy and messy launch and poor execution, can't be ignored itself. It's fine to look back at the game fondly for its high points, but doing so with rose-colored glasses only ignores the bad parts that the community, rightfully so, did not experience quite so fondly back in 2012 and 2013 during the game's original run. So what are your thoughts about Black Ops 2? Do you agree it might be getting an overinflated positive look back, or do you think I'm totally out of line trying to snatch the crown from many people's favorite entry in the series? Let me know your thoughts, and let me know if you enjoyed this style of commentary. Drop a comment or a like, and I'll see you in the next one.